under the cold rain of a lonely evening on a deserted road. A single mother was driving home after a long, exhausting day when she suddenly saw a man soaked, limping, and dragging himself along the roadside. Without hesitation, she rushed out to check on him and offered to help. She brought him home, made him tea, and warmed him by the fireplace. But she didn't know that this small act of kindness would completely change her life, starting the very next day. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow I have something special just for you. It had been raining since late afternoon. Not a dramatic downpour, just a cold, steady curtain that fell without pause. The kind of rain that soaked you through the moment you stepped into it. Sarah Whitmore drove carefully along the winding two-lane stretch just outside Brayfield, Pennsylvania, squinting past the rhythm of the wipers and the low glow of the headlights reflecting off wet asphalt. It was nearly 8. Her shift at the bakery had run long again, second time this week, but she hadn't said a word. That was Sarah's way. Just help where help was needed and go home quietly. She was tired not in the fleeting sense of a long day, but a deep fatigue that lived behind her ribs. Her son Liam would be waiting at home with his book, and a nightlight shaped like a fox probably already dozing. Her thoughts were on that image, on the warmth of home, and the faint hum of the heater when she saw him. A figure walking on the side of the road. It took a second to make sense of it, just a flash in the periphery, a shape caught in motion, but as she drove closer, it became clearer. A tall black man walking with a noticeable limp, soaked through, head bent against the rain. His hood was pulled forward, the weight of the wet fabric slumped low over his brow, and his backpack, dark heavy, hung unevenly off one shoulder. One of his boots looked waterlogged. She couldn't see much of his face, just the curve of a jaw, the shape of a frame that had once been strong and still tried to be. Sarah's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't slow down, not right away. A warning voice stirred in her mind, not her own, but stitched together from years of learned instincts. Don't stop. Not this late. Not for a stranger. Not for a man walking alone on a back road. Not for a black man. Especially not alone. Especially not now. She hated the thought, and hated even more that it had come to her without asking. The truck kept moving. The wipers scraped back and forth. Her jaw clenched, her eyes locked on the empty road ahead. But behind her ribs, something pulled. She knew that look, the posture of someone carrying too much, the steps of someone with nowhere else to go. Her father's voice echoed in the silence. If nobody else stops, maybe it's because you're the one meant to. She passed him maybe 100 feet. Then her foot lifted off the gas. Her father had served. He rarely spoke about it, but he always slowed down if he saw someone broken down on the road, always carried a thermal blanket in the back seat. He'd say, "You never know what kind of war they've just come from." Sarah exhaled through her nose, sharp and short, and eased the truck onto the shoulder. Rain hammered against the roof. She reversed slowly, deliberately, until the figure came into view again, illuminated by her headlights, the mist rising off the pavement around him. She cracked her window halfway, letting in the cold and the scent of mud and gasoline. "Hey!" she called out, her voice calm, steady. "You okay out here?" The man stopped walking, but didn't look at her right away. He stayed still for a moment, the rain pattering off his hood and jacket. Then he turned slightly, just enough for the dim light to catch the side of his face. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 30s, but there was something about the way he held himself that made him seem older. A scar ran down the right side of his face, long and raised from temple to jawline. His eyes were sharp but cautious. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said. His voice was low, a little hoarse, but controlled. Sarah looked at him, really looked, and answered without hesitation, "I didn't say you were." For a second, neither of them moved. Rain spilled off the edge of her window. Then, without another word, she reached across the seat and unlocked the passenger side. "I can drop you near the old base road if that's where you're headed." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the interior of the truck. Not suspicious, just calculating, measuring risk. That kind of vigilance wasn't something you turned off after living through combat or worse. After a moment, he nodded once. "Yeah, thanks." He climbed in carefully, one hand on the dashboard for balance. Sarah noticed the slight wince as he sat down, the way he shifted to take weight off his right leg. His jacket, though soaked, bore a faded patch, an old army insignia barely visible under the wet fabric. He smelled of rain, old canvas, and something metallic, like worn blood or rusted steel. She put the truck back in gear and merged onto the road. The wipers groaned. "You served?" she asked, keeping her tone even. "Yeah," he replied after a pause. "Discharged 2 weeks ago." Honorable, that earned a tired smirk. Only kind they'd let me leave with. They drove in silence for a while. No music, no chatter. Just the steady beat of rain on glass and the occasional squelch of wet tires rolling over blacktop. Sarah glanced at him during a red light. His hair was cropped close. His skin, even beneath the low light, was worn by sun and time. That scar caught the dash light like it was carved there on purpose. His shoulders were broad, but there was tension in the way he held them, as if always prepared for the next insult, the next assumption, the next door to stay shut. "You from this area?" "I'm just passing through, trying to get to Wilton." "That's a long walk, 20 miles at least." He shrugged with one shoulder. "Didn't have many options." "What about the VA?" He chuckled, no joy in it. "They helped me get out. That's about it. They passed the old turnoff. The sign was rusted halfway through." Sarah slowed and glanced toward the gate, locked now overgrown. "I can let you off here, but do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" He didn't answer, just stared ahead. She tried again, softer this time. "Do you have somewhere dry?" He turned toward her then, and she saw it, just a flicker, but it was there. Not vulnerability, not even need, just a kind of exhausted honesty. "No, I don't." Sarah nodded once quietly. "I have a couch." He didn't respond right away, just blinked once and said, finally, "Thank you." The drive back to Sarah's house didn't take long, but it felt longer than usual. The truck's heater, though working, could barely keep up with the chill that crept in through the vents. The air between them was quiet, not tense exactly, but careful. The kind of quiet that asked for space and patience. Terrence sat with his back mostly straight, his hands resting in his lap, fingers loosely laced together. He didn't fidget or tap his foot. He didn't lean back or slouch. He held himself with a calm that didn't feel relaxed. It felt trained. Sarah kept glancing his way when they stopped at signs or turned corners, noticing the way his eyes didn't rest. He scanned slowly, always checking the mirrors, the dashboard, the road ahead. She didn't ask him more questions. Something about him made it clear that he would answer if asked, but only what was necessary, and she wasn't sure she needed to know anything else right now. When they pulled into the gravel driveway, the porch light flickered twice before settling into a soft amber glow. Sarah parked the truck and cut the engine. The sound of the rain became louder, more present, without the engine's hum to mask it. She reached over, grabbing her reusable grocery tote from the floor of the passenger seat and slinging it over her shoulder. "You can come inside," she said, her voice even. "Just for tonight. I've got a couch." Terrence looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, then gave a slight nod. "Appreciate it." She led the way up the porch steps, keys and hand boots squishing quietly against the wet wood. When she unlocked the front door, the warm smell of cinnamon and old pine wood drifted out. She stepped inside first, flicked on the hallway light, then moved toward the small kitchen, flipping one more switch that lit the main room in a soft yellow hue. The space wasn't large, just an open kitchen, a worn-in couch facing a bookshelf, and a small TV, a coffee table with Liam's coloring books scattered underneath. She didn't apologize for the mess. She rarely had time to tidy after work, and tonight wasn't the kind of night for pretending things were more put together than they were. Terrence stepped inside and paused just for a second. Then he set his backpack down gently near the wall, slipped off his wet boots, and stood quietly, his posture still guarded but no longer rigid. Sarah opened a cabinet and grabbed a towel, holding it out toward him without fanfare. "Dry off a bit. You'll get sick sitting like that." "Thanks," he said, taking the towel. His fingers brushed hers lightly. His hands were rough and cold, the calluses clearly earned. He patted down his face, neck, and shoulders slowly, like he wasn't used to being dry indoors anymore. She put a kettle on the stove, pulled 2 mugs from the shelf, and without asking how he liked it, dropped a chamomile tea bag into each. The kitchen was quiet, except for the kettle warming and the sound of water still dripping from his coat to the hardwood floor. "You can sit if you want," she said, gesturing to the couch. He nodded once and did, moving slowly. Sarah noticed him wince again as he adjusted into a seat, favoring his right side. She thought about asking if he was injured, but held back. Instead, she poured the hot water into the mugs, carried them over, and set one on the coffee table in front of him. "Sugar's in the jar," she offered. "Plain is fine," he replied. She sat in the chair across from him, not too close, not far. She sipped her tea and studied him in a way she hoped wasn't obvious. The lamp beside the couch gave off enough light to see more of him now. His skin, deep brown, glistened faintly from the rain. The scar down his face was still red at the edges, newer than she thought. His eyes, though dark, didn't seem cold, just tired, not the kind of tired sleep could fix. A soft shuffle from the hallway made them both glance toward the sound. A small figure stood near the corner, Liam barefoot hugging his stuffed fox to his chest, his pajama pants bunched up at the ankles. His eyes were wide, curious, but not afraid. Sarah stood slowly. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said, walking over. "We've got a visitor tonight. Why don't you go back to bed, okay?" Liam looked at Terrence, then at her, then nodded. "Is he a friend?" Sarah hesitated. "He's someone who needed a ride." Liam didn't ask more. He just yawned and turned away. "Tell him I don't mind if he uses my blanket. The blue one's softer." Sarah smiled. "Thanks, bud." When she returned to the living room, Terrence was staring at the cup in front of him, like it held some kind of secret. She sat back down, this time a little more relaxed. "Still no questions. Still no assumptions. I've got extra sheets. The couch isn't much, but it doesn't creak as loud as it used to." He looked at her again, not with suspicion, but something like confusion. Or maybe disbelief. "You don't have to do this. I know. I don't have anything to give you. I didn't ask for anything." He looked down, then picked up the mug, holding it with both hands like it was grounding him. You'd be surprised how many people say they're not judging. Then they do. Sarah tilted her head slightly. "You didn't give me a reason to." He didn't respond, but he drank the tea. Slowly. Carefully. Like it had been a long time since someone made something warm just because they could. Later, after setting out a pillow and a thin blanket on the couch, Sarah retreated to her room. She didn't lock the door. She thought about it reflexively, but didn't. Something about him didn't feel threatening. It felt unsettled, yes, but not dangerous. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. No creaking, no shifting, just rain outside and the faint ticking of the old kitchen clock. When morning came, it wasn't the sound of movement or a closing door that woke her. It was the stillness. She walked into the kitchen to start the coffee and stopped. The couch was empty. The pillow and blanket were folded neatly. The towel he'd used was dry, hung carefully over the back of the chair. But what caught her eye, what made her freeze mid-step, was what lay beside the sink. A small worn medal. The purple ribbon faded the metal cool against the counter. A purple heart. Sarah's breath caught. She didn't touch it. Not at first. She stared at it as if it were something sacred. Not because of what it was, but because of what it meant that the man who had sat here in silence with his scars and his silence and his heavy backpack had seen real battle, real pain, and he had left this behind. Eventually, she picked it up, gently wrapping it in a clean dishcloth and placing it inside the second drawer near the fridge. She didn't know why. She just knew she couldn't leave it out. It didn't belong in the open like something discarded. It belonged somewhere it could rest. She told no one. Not her neighbor. Not her friend Nora. Not even Liam. That morning, she went about her routine, made toast-packed lunch, got Liam off to school, but something in her was quieter than usual. Not sad, just full. Full of questions, full of echoes, full of a weight she didn't know how to name. The purple heart stayed in the drawer between a rubber band ball, a dried-out pen, and a note from Liam that read, "You're the best mom," written in bright orange crayon. She didn't know what to do with any of it, so like always, she just kept going. The kitchen felt colder that morning, not because of the weather, but because Terrence was gone. No goodbye, no trace of where he went, just that folded towel on the armrest, still faintly damp from his use, and the small medal beside the sink. A purple heart faded slightly at the edges, like it had been carried too long in too many places. Sarah didn't touch it right away. She couldn't. Something about the weight of it, the meaning it carried, made her hands feel too ordinary to hold it. Instead, she stood at the counter in silence, letting the steam rise from her untouched cup of tea, while Liam shuffled in with his blanket around his shoulders, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Is he gone, Mama?" Liam asked, his voice soft, like he was afraid saying it too loud would make it more true. Sarah nodded. She didn't say anything at first. She just brushed his hair back gently and told him to grab his socks before the kitchen got any colder. That was it. No explanation. No unpacking the emotions swirling in her chest. Just socks, toast, and a school lunch to pack. Life, as always, pushed forward. She placed the medal in the kitchen drawer later that day, wrapping it carefully in one of her mother's old dishcloths and laying it beside a few loose buttons, expired coupons, and a crumpled drawing Liam had made of their trailer under a rainbow. She didn't tell anyone. Not Nora, not the bakery girls, and definitely not her mother, who would have demanded answers Sarah couldn't give. The whole thing felt too fragile to explain a quiet act that somehow meant everything and nothing all at once. So she did what people like her had always done. She folded it away, tucked the feelings behind duty, and moved on. Or at least she tried. 3 days later, the letter came. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and official-looking, with her name printed in bold block letters across the front. No handwriting, no stamps, just a printed return address, Maple Ridge Credit Union. She sat at the table for nearly 20 minutes before opening it, tracing the edge of the flap with her thumbnail. When she finally unfolded the letter, her eyes locked on the first line. Notice of foreclosure proceedings, immediate attention required. Her stomach dropped. They were behind. She knew that. Ever since the bakery cut back her hours, she'd been scraping by baking cakes for neighbors late at night, selling her mother's old jewelry piece by piece, even canceling the internet twice, until Liam's teacher called to say he needed it for schoolwork. But she thought they had more time. She thought maybe the next paycheck would be enough. Maybe the loan officer would be kind. Maybe they wouldn't actually follow through. But banks didn't run on kindness. They ran on dates and digits and deadlines. Sarah read the letter twice, then a third time. 30 days. That's how long she had until the home her father built with its patched roof and leaning shed and garden Liam planted sunflowers in every spring would be listed, auctioned, and gone. She didn't cry. Not then. Instead, she took the letter, folded it with shaking hands, and placed it beside the wrapped purple heart in the drawer. Then she went to work. At the bakery, no one noticed the weight she carried. Sarah still wore the same soft smile, still poured coffee into the same chipped mugs, still asked Officer Jim if he wanted extra cinnamon. She still teased Nora about her ridiculous blind dates and offered the regulars a warm croissant with their pie. She was the same dependable Sarah Bennett, the one who didn't ask for help, who always showed up, who never let anything show. But inside, she was fraying. The late nights were stretching longer, the bills piling higher. She'd begun measuring time not in days, but in overdue notices. And every night when Liam fell asleep holding his stuffed raccoon, she would sit in the kitchen staring at the towel Terrence had folded and wondering what kind of man leaves behind a medal like that and why she couldn't stop thinking about him. One evening, as she wiped down the counters for the third time in 10 minutes, Nora finally set down her mop and leaned against the doorway. "All right, what is it?" she said. Sarah looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you forgot snack day. You gave Officer Jim plain coffee, and you haven't rolled your eyes at my dating life all week. Something's off. Spill it." There was a beat of silence. Then Sarah did. Not everything, not the full story, but enough. She told Nora about the man on the road, the storm, the couch, the medal. She didn't mention the race thing directly, though she didn't have to. Nora, sharp as ever, understood. She told her about the letter, the foreclosure, the looming sense that everything she'd tried to build was slipping out from under her feet. Nora didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp or lecture or ask why Sarah hadn't said anything sooner. She just leaned back and said simply, "That sucks." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in weeks. Sarah let out a laugh, a short, exhausted sound that cracked at the edges. "Yeah," she whispered, "it really does." That night back home, Sarah tucked Liam into bed and sat quietly at the kitchen table long after the house had gone still. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters just enough to keep her on edge. The drawer beside her creaked slightly when she opened it, as if even the furniture was weary. She took out the medal again, ran her thumb across the frayed ribbon. She still hadn't told Liam what it was or who it belonged to. Some part of her felt like it wasn't hers to explain. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to let go of it either. As she sat there, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room, she thought about how easy it would be to give up, to just let the house go. Take Liam, move in with her mother, start over somewhere smaller. People did it all the time. But then she thought of the look in Liam's eyes when he watered the garden, or the way his footsteps sounded as he ran across the wooden floorboards, and she knew she couldn't. Not yet, because this house wasn't just a roof and walls. It was memory. It was sweat and soil and bedtime stories. It was the last real thing she had left that felt like hers. And somehow, even though he was gone, the presence of that quiet man with the haunted eyes and the soldier's scar made her believe, if only for a moment, that maybe she wasn't alone in this fight. She folded the towel again, placed the metal back in the drawer, and whispered into the silence, "Wherever you are, thank you." Then she turned off the light and climbed into bed, bracing herself for whatever came next. Because it wasn't just kindness that had visited her that night. It was something more. And deep down, she wasn't ready to give up on it just yet. Sarah wasn't expecting anything in the mail except more bills. So when the envelope arrived without a return address or stamp, it gave her pause. The handwriting was sharp, upright, and unmistakably deliberate, each letter of her name written with the kind of care that made her stomach tighten before she even opened it. The paper inside was heavier than usual, the kind used for letters that were meant to be remembered. She unfolded it carefully, half expecting it to be another form of disappointment. But instead, there it was. A single line, no flourish, no greeting, just, "You reminded me I still mattered. T.H." She read it once, then again. Her hands didn't tremble, but her breath caught quiet and sudden. There was no question in her mind who had written it. The man who had said so little, who had disappeared without a word, had found a way to say more in one sentence than some people did in a lifetime. She held the paper in her hand like it was fragile, then folded it just once and placed it beside the purple heart in the drawer underneath the old dish towel. For a moment, that simple act steadied her. It told her that what she had done, what she had chosen to do that night, had mattered to someone. And in a world where her kindness had started to feel like a liability, that mattered more than she could admit out loud. But the comfort didn't last. 2 days later, just before noon, the knock came. It wasn't heavy or aggressive, just the even rhythm of someone with authority and purpose. Sarah wiped her hands on a kitchen towel and opened the door to find Sheriff Dunning standing there, his uniform crisp, one hand resting on his belt. He didn't smile. "Miss Bennett," he said, nodding. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" She stepped aside instinctively, unsure what else to do. He didn't sit, didn't remove his hat, just stood in the middle of her living room like someone inspecting damage. "Had a few folks call about a man seen leaving your place a week back. Big guy, black, walked with a limp. You know anything about that?" Sarah met his gaze and chose her words carefully. "He needed help. It was raining. I gave him a place to rest. That's all." Dunning's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything for a beat. Then he asked, "Did he say his name?" She shook her head. "No, he didn't offer, and I didn't ask." He let out a quiet exhale somewhere between disbelief and warning. "You should be more careful, Sarah. Folks get nervous when strangers show up out of nowhere, especially ones who look like they don't belong." "He didn't do anything wrong," she said a little sharper than she meant to. Dunning raised his eyebrows. "I didn't say he did. But in times like these, people make assumptions. Don't give them a reason to." He left without incident, but the silence he left behind clung to her walls like smoke. That evening, when Liam came home and asked if someone had been by, she said it was just the sheriff checking on things. He nodded and moved on. Kids always did, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something invisible had shifted. The next morning, as she walked Liam to the bus stop, she noticed it, on the wall near the mailbox. Faded spray paint hurriedly scrawled. 3 words, "White Sympathizer." She stopped walking. Liam tugged on her coat sleeve. "Mom." She quickly smiled, ruffled his hair, and urged him onto the bus. "Have a good day, sweetheart." But her heart was pounding. Not from fear, not yet, but from a cold, creeping understanding. Someone had seen. Someone didn't approve. And someone had decided to say it loud enough for others to read. Back inside, Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, the cushion still holding the faint outline of where Terrence had slept. She stared at the spray paint through the window. The words didn't sting because they were wrong. They stung because they were deliberate, because they told her exactly what kind of place she lived, in a place that was friendly, only if you stayed inside the lines. She had stepped out just for a night, and now she was being pushed back in. Later at the bakery, Carolyn asked if everything was all right. Sarah nodded. She always nodded, even when her stomach was tight and her thoughts loud. Even when she felt the sideways glances from other parents in the grocery store. Even when she overheard 2 women whispering at the post office about the woman who let him in. That night, after Liam had gone to bed, Sarah opened the drawer. The metal was still there. The note, too. She held the paper in her hand again and whispered, "Was I wrong?" She didn't know if she meant letting him in or staying silent or letting herself believe that small kindness could still mean something. But the question stayed thick in the air, unanswered. And then she folded the letter again and placed it back gently, the way you handle something fragile, because no matter what the town whispered, she knew what she saw in that man's eyes, someone who had needed to be seen. And she had seen him. She had chosen not to look away. And maybe even if no one else understood, that choice still mattered. It happened on a Tuesday late morning when Sarah was pulling weeds by the fence that bordered the back of her small garden. The sun had finally come out after 3 gray days, and the air smelled like wet soil and old leaves. She was on her knees, hands caked with dirt, mind lost in the rhythm of tugging dandelions, when she heard a car door shut. Not the quick slam of a delivery driver, but a deliberate, close, firm, careful. She stood up, brushing her hands off on her jeans, and walked toward the front yard, her boots crunching across the gravel with each step. She wasn't expecting anyone. At first, she didn't recognize him. He was standing tall now, not hunched by pain or fatigue, and his clothes were clean, pressed with sharp creases that hadn't been there before. But it was the eyes that stopped her. Steady, quiet, still carrying a shadow, but clearer now. He wasn't alone. 2 other men stood beside him, both in uniform, both watching her with calm, respectful expressions. One held a sealed envelope. The other carried a small case tucked neatly under one arm. Sarah opened the gate slowly. "Terrence." He nodded once, then spoke in that same low voice she remembered, but with more weight now. "I wanted to say thank you." Properly. She glanced at the men behind him, uncertain, her pulse quickening. Liam, hearing voices, peeked from the window. Terrence noticed and gave a soft smile before turning back to her. "These are my colleagues," he said. "Captain Boyd, Sergeant Mason. We're here on behalf of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And myself." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did," he said, and there was no room for debate in his tone. "You opened your door to a stranger. No questions. No judgment. That shouldn't be rare, but it is. And it mattered." The captain stepped forward, handing her the envelope. "This is a formal letter of acknowledgement for your service to a veteran in crisis. You also qualified for support through our Civilian Community Bond Program. There was a fund established years ago for situations like this. It's been underutilized." She took the envelope with slow fingers, not sure if she was dreaming or standing. The second man opened the case and pulled out a folder, speaking clearly. "We reviewed the lien on your property. Due to the actions taken by Mr. Hampton and the supporting documentation provided, we submitted a request for debt forgiveness. As of this morning, the foreclosure is rescinded. Your mortgage is cleared. The home is yours." Sarah blinked. The words hit her one by one like raindrops after a drought. Mortgage, cleared, home, hers. "I don't understand," she whispered. I didn't do anything that special." Terrence shook his head. "You did something almost no one else would have. You saw me." Liam opened the door, then stepping barefoot onto the porch. "Is that the man who drank the tea?" Sarah half laughed, half sobbed. "Yes, baby. That's him." Liam looked at the men in uniform, then back at her. "So because you gave tea to a stranger, we get to keep our house." Sarah crouched down, pulling him into her arms. Her voice cracked. "Yeah, we do." Terrence stepped forward slightly, but not too close. He didn't want to impose. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a small photo, old and faded. "This is my brother," he said. "He didn't make it home, but if he had, I'd hope someone would have done for him what you did for me." Sarah took the photo gently, nodding too full to speak. Captain Boyd cleared his throat. "We'll be in touch. We'd like to feature your story in the community newsletter if that's all right. Might help folks see things differently." Sarah gave a small smile. "We'll see." When the men left, Sarah stood in the yard with Liam clinging to her side, the envelope still in her hand. She didn't open it right away. She didn't need to. The tightness in her chest was already starting to ease. Inside, she placed the documents next to the Purple Heart and the note, her drawer of quiet proofs. This time, she didn't close it right away. She let it stay open for a while, letting the air move through it as if those simple objects needed to breathe too. Later that night, Liam drew a picture of their house, same as always, but this time with a little flag on the roof and 3 stick figures standing outside. He handed it to her with a grin. "That's us," he said, "and that's the man who came back." Sarah looked at the picture for a long time. In it, they were all smiling, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they would be okay. The letter arrived, folded in thirds, slipped into her mailbox without ceremony just 2 days after Terrence and the officers had left her porch. Sarah had nearly tossed it, thinking it was another grocery flyer, but the seal on the corner caught her eye. a pale gold insignia from the county land office. Her stomach sank as she opened it. The words were precise, legal, and sterile. Her property's backlot, a parcel that stretched beyond the original trailer, was under review. A dispute had been filed. An entity called Mayfield Redevelopment had claimed interest in the unused land beyond the garden, citing unresolved historic liens from decades ago. The letter requested her presence for a clarification meeting the following Monday. Sarah read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change, but her chest tightened just the same. On Monday morning, she wore her best jeans, a pressed flannel shirt, and boots Liam had helped clean the night before. As she stood before the county building, she took a breath, looked up at the flag fluttering against the cloudy sky, and stepped inside. The carpet smelled like dust and printer toner. At the reception desk, a young woman barely looked up as she directed Sarah down the hall to room 14. Inside, a man in a tailored suit sat behind a long table with 2 leather folders in front of him. He was clean-cut, younger than she expected, with an expression that was pleasant enough but distant. The kind of smile you wear when you're trained to win without raising your voice. Across from him, a gray-haired clerk adjusted her glasses and gestured for Sarah to sit. "Miss Bennett," the suited man began sliding one of the folders across the table. "We're here to clarify a small ownership inconsistency concerning your property. It appears that a portion of your rear lot, particularly the area beyond the tree line, was never formally transferred from your late father's estate." Sarah frowned. "My father cleared that land, planted on it, built a fence. It's always been ours." The man gave a rehearsed nod. "Understandable. Unfortunately, documentation from the 1970s shows an unresolved lien that predates the fence. Our client Mayfield Redevelopment purchased those outstanding liens last year and is pursuing legal consolidation." Legal consolidation. What does that mean? They are seeking full ownership through title conversion. In simpler terms, they intend to build. The lot is zoned for multifamily housing. Sarah's mouth went dry. "That land is not for sale. That land has fed veterans, fed my family." The clerk shifted uncomfortably. The man kept his tone measured. "The law doesn't consider usage, Miss Bennett, just ownership. We're offering a courtesy option for voluntary surrender to streamline proceedings." Sarah leaned forward, gripping the edge of the chair. "Are you asking me to give up the land my father died trying to keep up just because someone found a piece of paper in a filing cabinet?" "Not asking, informing. The process has started. You have 30 days to dispute the claim through a formal appeal. Otherwise, possession reverts." Sarah stood slowly. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears. "That's not just land. That's memory. That's dignity. You can put it in a file and call it whatever you want. But to us, that's sacred." The man didn't flinch. "Sacred doesn't hold up in court, Miss Bennett. It's not protected community land, just dirt." Her chest burned. She turned and left without another word. Outside, the air felt heavier than before. Her boots scuffed the steps on the way down, and she noticed for the first time just how cracked the pavement around the county office was, like the ground had been forgotten too. She sat in her truck for 10 minutes before driving home. She didn't turn the radio on. She didn't cry. She just drove. That evening, Liam found her standing silently by the edge of the garden, staring past the fence line. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just stood beside her and took her hand. Later, she called Terrence. It went to voicemail the first time. She tried again. The third ring picked up. "Hey," he said. Just that one word. Sarah swallowed. "They're trying to take the back lot. Some company. They dug up something from the 70s, and now they want to build apartments." There was a pause. She heard him exhale slowly. "Mayfield." "Yes. I know the name. I'll see what I can find out. Terrence, it's not just about the land. It's like they're erasing him. My dad. They always go after what we can't defend with money, but we'll defend it another way. Don't sign anything." She nodded even though he couldn't see her. "I won't." After the call, Sarah opened the drawer where she kept the medal and the note. She added the letter from the county office to the stack. It didn't belong, but it was part of the same fight now. A different kind of battle, no guns, no uniforms, but just as ruthless. The garden, still charred from a previous frost, looked weary in the moonlight, but Sarah stood straighter now. If they wanted a fight on paper, she would give them one. Theirs might come with lawyers and contracts. Hers would come with memory, and with the people she had helped, who just might be ready to stand with her when the time came. It was just past midnight when Sarah awoke to a strange flicker casting long shadows across the ceiling. At first, she thought it was the porch light, or perhaps a car turning around in the driveway. But when she sat up, her breath caught. An orange glow was pulsing through the window blinds, rhythmic and too alive to be anything but fire. She flung off the covers, her bare feet slapping the cold floor as she rushed to the window. The house behind the tree line, an old abandoned structure Sarah remembered from her childhood, long since left to rot, was ablaze. The flames licked upward with a terrifying hunger, dancing along the collapsing frame, spitting sparks into the wind. But it wasn't just that house. Her garden, the back lot where she had stood just hours earlier, still stewing over Mayfield's letter, was catching. She stumbled into Liam's room. "Get up now!" Her voice was sharp, commanding. Liam, half asleep, blinked at her as she grabbed his jacket and shoved his arms into it. "What's going on?" he mumbled. "Fire. Behind the house. We need to move." The words kicked in fast. He bolted upright, eyes wide, fear blooming on his face. Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services as they rushed outside. "Yes, there's a fire behind my property near Jefferson and Maple. It's spreading fast." The operator's voice was calm, but not comforting. "Ma'am, units are dispatched, but it may take 15 to 20 minutes. Sarah looked back. Flames were already creeping along the fence, swallowing the brittle weeds and dried soil that hadn't seen rain in weeks. 15 minutes. That would be too late. She ushered Liam into the truck, but paused. The shed, the small wooden one behind the trailer, was close to the fire line. Liam had books in there, drawings, the photo album of her father that she hadn't scanned yet. "Stay in the truck," she shouted. She sprinted back toward the shed, the heat hitting her like a wave. But halfway there, she heard tires screech. A dark SUV pulled up, doors slammed, and then out of the smoke, she heard a familiar voice. Sarah Terrence. She turned just as he and two other men, both in heavy-duty jackets, emerged with fire extinguishers. One of them, tall and broad, yanked open the truck door and pulled a small bag from the back. The other shouted, "Where's the hydrant?" Sarah pointed. "Corner of the lot." They moved like they had trained for this, which she later learned they had. Jonas had been a firefighter before enlisting. Reed was a mechanic who had fought brush fires in the Arizona reserves. And Terrence, he was the one who went straight for the flames. He saw the path of the fire and didn't hesitate. He tore open the hose line they carried and began dousing the base near the garden, choking it at the root before it could crawl toward the shed. The smoke stung everyone's eyes. Sarah coughed violently, clutching Liam to her side as they watched. And then it happened. A crack, loud and sharp. A tree limb, dry and aged, snapped and crashed down near the shed. Liam shrieked. Sarah froze. The heat surged forward as if angry they had resisted. For a heartbeat, everything blurred in panic. And then Terrence was there, scooping Liam up, shielding the boy with his own jacket. Sarah ran toward them, tears mixing with ash on her cheeks. "I told you to stay in the truck," she cried, hugging Liam tightly. Terrence handed him off, chest heaving. "He went after his sketchbook," he said, voice rough but steady. "Got it, by the way." They both looked down. Liam's hands clutched the frayed edge of a brown notebook. He sniffled. "It has Grandpa's picture in it." Jonas and Reed were still spraying, beating the remaining flames back with rakes and shovels they'd found in Sarah's shed. After what felt like forever, the orange receded to gray. The sirens finally came, their lights cutting through the haze like distant thunder. But the worst of it was already over. One firefighter approached Sarah. "You're lucky someone acted when they did. That wind would have carried the fire straight through the whole street." She looked at Terrence, who had collapsed onto the porch step, sweat glistening on his brow, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. Sarah knelt beside him. "How did you know?" he exhaled. Jonas had a feeling. "We were just driving around clearing our heads. Saw the glow before we even hit your street. Didn't think. Just drove in." Reed nodded. "Besides, you gave him a couch once. Seems like the least we could do." The firefighters worked around them, securing the perimeter, noting damage, asking procedural questions. But the emotional weight of what just happened settled silently. The garden was half gone. Charred earth, twisted fencing. The shed barely survived, but the house stood. And Liam was alive. Later that morning, when the sun had finally risen, neighbors came. First one, then two. Then 5. Some offered coffee. Others stood awkwardly unsure of what to say. One woman, Mrs. Clifton from across the street, spoke up. "I saw what he did." Everyone turned. She pointed at Terrence. "He ran in. Didn't stop. Saved that boy like he was his own." There were nods. A murmur. No applause. But something changed, not just for Sarah, for everyone watching. The man they had once whispered about, avoided, judged, tonight he had run toward the flames. Not because he had to, because it was the right thing to do. And slowly, as the smoke lifted, so did the weight of prejudice. They didn't forget what they had assumed, but now they had seen something else. And seeing changes everything. In the aftermath of the fire, something shifted. It wasn't just in the charred earth or the smoke-stained siding of Sarah's trailer. It was in the way neighbors began to look at her again, not with suspicion, but with something softer, something closer to recognition. The man they had once whispered about had run into the fire for a child who wasn't his. And not just any child, but a white boy, the son of a woman no one had dared to stand with days before. The story traveled not in headlines or police reports, but in porch conversations, in quiet phone calls, and sideways glances over backyard fences. But the fight wasn't over. The flames may have spared her home, but they hadn't burned away the threats written in ink. A letter arrived 2 days later, this one stamped official and wrapped in legal terminology Sarah barely understood. It reaffirmed the intent to reclaim the back portion of her lot. The language was colder this time, stripped of any pretense. The message was simple. That land was no longer protected. It was just real estate now. Sarah stood on the edge of the property that evening, staring at the blackened soil where her father used to plant tomatoes. The ash crunched beneath her boots. She held the paper in one hand, her other resting on the fence post, the smell of smoke still clinging to the air like a warning. She didn't cry this time. She didn't have it in her. She just stood there, tired, defiant, and unsure what to do next. Terrence pulled up just as the sun began to dip behind the trees. He didn't say anything at first, just walked over and stood beside her, his presence quiet and solid. "They're still coming after it," she said, not turning. I figured he replied, then added, "Let me make a call." Sarah looked at him. "To who? The mayor, the governor, because unless one of them owes you a favor." "Not the governor," Terrence said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "But I know someone who knows how to pull threads when things don't smell right." The next morning, a black sedan pulled into her drive. A tall woman in her early 50s stepped out dressed not like a politician, but like someone who had spent more time in courtrooms than boardrooms. She introduced herself simply, "Valerie Knox. I do legal advocacy for veterans and federal land disputes." Terrence called in a favor. Sarah led her inside, unsure how much to hope for. Valerie laid out her laptop, scanned the documents, and frowned almost immediately. "This acquisition order is weak," she said, "and it was rushed." Sarah blinked. "Is that bad for me?" Valerie shook her head. "No, bad for them." They slipped up. Over the next several days, Valerie worked quietly, but intensely. She made calls to land registry offices, requested transcripts, dug into the county's public records. Sarah watched from the side, trying to stay hopeful. Then one afternoon, Valerie walked in with a small folder and a strange smile. "There's something you should see," she said. Inside the folder were copies of emails from the office of Sheriff Dunning. One of them showed direct correspondence between Dunning and a Mayfield development executive. The subject line timing the public hearing. Another included phrases like influencing the board and accelerate the reclassification. Sarah sat back. Her hands were cold. Valerie nodded. "We have enough to open an ethics investigation, possibly more, but we need one more thing. Do you know if Dunning ever signed off on your father's lot papers?" Sarah searched through the old drawer where her father kept everything: birth certificates, tax receipts, faded photographs. And there it was. A handwritten note from Dunning himself dated years ago confirming the parcel's designation as community support land. It wasn't just a defense, it was proof of betrayal. Valerie moved fast. Within 48 hours, a formal complaint was filed. Local news caught wind of it. The words conflict of interest and land misuse investigation started floating in news tickers. And for the first time in months, Sarah felt like she could breathe without choking. Then came the hearing. Not a courtroom, but a stiff county office filled with chairs that squeaked and microphones that hummed too loud. Valerie spoke first, presenting the evidence methodically. She laid out the inconsistencies, the inappropriate emails, the hidden correspondences, the past agreements buried beneath legal jargon. Then it was Sarah's turn. She didn't want to speak at first. She wasn't used to rooms full of strangers staring at her like she mattered. But she stood anyway. "This land behind my house," she began, voice steady. "It isn't just dirt. My father grew food there. He gave it away to neighbors, to veterans, to anyone who needed it. It was part of our life. And when he passed, I tried to keep that going, until someone decided it was worth more on paper than in people. There was silence. Not heavy, just full. When the board voted, it was unanimous. The acquisition was declared invalid. The land was reinstated as protected use. The Mayfield proposal was dropped. Later that week, as Valerie packed her things, Sarah tried to thank her. Valerie waved her off. "Thank the man who called me. Most people forget what service looks like when it doesn't come in uniform." Terrence stood nearby, arms folded, saying nothing. Sarah turned to him. "Why did you help me this much?" He shrugged slightly. "Because you didn't ask me who I was the first time. And because sometimes people don't need charity. They need a chance." That night, the garden lay still, the soil untouched since the fire, but it was hers again. Safe. Not because someone gave it to her, because she fought for it, and because others fought beside her. The next day, a small notice appeared in the local paper. Sheriff Dunning was being placed on administrative leave, pending investigation. No headline, no photo. But it was enough. Justice sometimes arrives quiet, like a stamp in the right place, or a signature finally used to protect, not take away. And in that quiet, something new took root. The earth behind Sarah's trailer smelled different after the fire and the fight that followed. There was still a trace of ash in the breeze, but it no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a memory. 1 week after the hearing, she stood again where her father once dug his rows, sleeves rolled up, shovel in hand. The frost had started to melt early that season, and with each break of soil, Sarah felt a kind of quiet return taking shape. There was no fanfare, no applause, just the scrape of metal in the ground and her own breath steadying, as if something inside her had decided it was time to rebuild. She didn't need anyone to notice. She needed to know it was hers. By late afternoon, the beginnings of the new garden took form: a few cleared beds, a simple trellis, and in the corner near the fence, she hammered in a wooden sign. She painted it by hand using an old brush and leftover house paint, each letter slow and deliberate. Free produce for veterans. No questions. It wasn't just a message. It was a promise she now understood the weight of. Her father never needed a sign. He had his hands and his word, but Sarah wanted it there. Not for attention, but so no one could forget what this place meant. Not anymore. Later that week, on a morning colored by birdsong and a faint wind, a dark sedan pulled up just beyond the edge of the driveway. Sarah was kneeling in the dirt-gloved hands covered in soil when the door opened and Terrence stepped out. He wore no uniform, no medals, nothing that called attention to who he had been or what he had done. Just a gray button-down and the same worn boots from the night he first showed up in the rain. In his hand, a small envelope. He didn't wave, just walked over, waited until she noticed, and said, almost like a question, "It looks better than it did." Sarah smiled faintly, wiping her face with the inside of her arm. "It's getting there." He handed her the envelope. "Thought you might want this." She hesitated, then opened it slowly. Inside, a single photograph. It was him standing on the steps of the Capitol behind a podium. His hands rested on the sides, his shoulders squared. But it wasn't the pose that made her stare. It was the sign in front of him. Not printed, handwritten. In thick black marker on cardboard, "She saw me when I couldn't see myself." Sarah held the photo tighter than she meant to. Her voice cracked soft. "They let you say that." "They didn't have a choice," Terrence said, looking away toward the garden. "You gave me the words. I just said them out loud." They stood there for a long moment, the kind of silence that didn't press, didn't demand. It just made space. Terrence nodded once, then stepped back toward his car. Before he left, he said quietly, "The garden looks like it remembers you." As he drove away, Sarah felt a strange stillness settle over her chest. It wasn't emptiness. It was the kind of calm that comes when something long bent finally finds its shape again. She tucked the photo inside the garden shed behind the box of seeds. Not hidden, just waiting, like a root ready to sprout. Over the next few days, the garden drew quiet visitors. A man in a denim jacket came by and left without speaking, but returned the next day with a small sack of potatoes. A woman Sarah didn't recognize knocked softly and asked if she could leave a few starter plants from her own yard. And then there were the veterans' gray-haired, slow-moving eyes sharp. Some nodded. Some left tokens on the porch, an old medal, a folded note, a carved cross. None of them stayed long, but their presence filled the silence that had once haunted Sarah's evenings. One morning, Liam ran out to the garden barefoot, holding a small tin can. For the lettuce, he said proudly. I saw that on a TV show. Sarah laughed, real and unguarded. It had been too long since she'd heard herself laugh like that. Carolyn from down the road came by one afternoon, slow but firm in her steps. She didn't say much either, just stood at the edge of the garden, looked over the rows, and nodded. Your daddy would have liked this, she said. He would have said it made the place feel like home again. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat. I hope so. Carolyn looked at her eyes soft. You didn't have to do this, you know. I didn't, Sarah agreed, but it felt like something that should stay. Carolyn placed a hand on her shoulder briefly. Some things are worth keeping. That night, Sarah sat on the porch with Liam beside her legs swinging off the edge. The stars had begun to prick the sky. The wind had that cool bite of early spring. Liam leaned his head on her shoulder and asked, not with worry, but with genuine curiosity, why do people keep coming here, Mom? They just look around and then leave. She thought for a moment, then said, because sometimes people don't know if they matter. And when they come here, something about this place reminds them that they do. Liam was quiet. Then he asked, did someone remind you? Sarah smiled. Yes, in the rain. One night I didn't expect. He nodded content, and after a while he went back inside. But Sarah stayed. Her eyes drifted over the rows, over the trellis, the fresh soil, the little wooden sign catching moonlight. No plaque, no speeches, no credit. Just seeds planted and grown. Just a space where someone might be seen. Fan 10, the keepers of the fire. The mornings had turned softer in Maple Hollow. The sharp chill that used to greet Sarah when she stepped out onto the porch had mellowed into something gentler, something that carried the scent of soil and the quiet creak of leaves swaying in a forgiving wind. The garden behind her home, once half-charred and written off by developers and doubters alike, now bloomed in defiance. It was never about perfect rows or pristine fences. It grew unevenly, a little wild, a little tired, but wholly alive like the people it welcomed. On the old plank that marked the garden's entrance, Sarah had painted in her own brushstroke, uneven and purposeful, free produce for veterans, no questions. Each morning she brewed coffee with the same care she used to reserve for guests, even though most who came by didn't knock. Some wandered in, heads lowered, eyes scanning not out of fear, but from the habit of being ignored for too long. Others came slowly, their pace slowed not just by age or injury, but by the weight of having survived things most people never talked about. Sarah didn't ask them why they came. She didn't need to. She offered a chair, a thermos of tea, or sometimes just silence, and watched the space between people shrink a little more each week. Liam had taken to spending his afternoons in the garden after school. He didn't say much about it, but she noticed the way he sat with one particular old man, a Navy vet who never used his real name, but always had a jar of pickled okra in hand. They'd talk in short bursts sometimes, only trading a few sentences the whole hour, but Liam always came back with that look Sarah hadn't seen in months, curious, grounded, a little older. One late morning, as Sarah was arranging a few fresh tomatoes in a crate near the edge of the garden, Liam came up behind her, hands in his hoodie pockets, his voice almost too quiet to hear over the wind. Why do they come here? He asked. Sarah turned. His eyes weren't challenging, just wide searching. She wiped her hands on her apron, brushed a leaf from his shoulder, and answered as if she'd been waiting to, because for a long time they thought nobody saw them. Not really, but now they know someone does. Liam tilted his head. You mean you? She smiled gently. I mean anyone who looks at them like they belong. Sometimes one person doing that is enough to remind them they do. That afternoon, as the sun drooped lower behind the barn, a boy about Liam's age walked up the gravel path. Sarah didn't recognize him, but something in the way he held himself felt familiar. He was clutching a small brown envelope worn soft at the corners. He didn't say hello. He just stood a few feet from her garden table, looking at the painted sign, then back at her. Are you Miss Sarah? He asked, voice cracking slightly. She nodded. That's me. He swallowed. My dad. He came here once. You gave him a basket and didn't ask anything. Sarah nodded again, slower this time. She remembered the man. Rough beard eyes, too tired for someone his age. Said nothing but took the tomatoes like they were something sacred. He doesn't smile a lot, the boy said, pressing the envelope into her hand. But he did after that. He said this place helped. Sarah felt the air shift heavier now. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a photo printed from a home printer, faded at the edges. The man was standing in his kitchen, holding up a small jar of canned green beans like it was a trophy. He was smiling. wide, honest. He said to tell you thank you, that you reminded him he's not just someone people pass by. Sarah didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat tightened as she looked at the picture again. Then she looked at the boy and saw his father in his posture, in the guarded hope in his face. She reached into the produce crate, pulled out a ripe pear, and handed it to him. For him, she said softly. Tell him the garden's always open. The boy nodded and walked back down the path, turning once to look back. Sarah watched him until the dust settled behind his sneakers. Then she sat down, picture still in hand, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't empty. It was full of things no one had said out loud. A few days later, she found Terrence's photo in the mailbox. No note, just a print creased down one side showing him at a podium in Washington. He was flanked by 2 other veterans. His jacket bore no ribbons, no signs of rank, just a plain pin on the lapel. He held a sign, the kind someone might scribble last minute at a protest, but his handwriting was unmistakable. She saw me when I couldn't see myself. Sarah placed it next to the Purple Heart in her drawer just beside the folded letter that started it all. No plaque hung in her garden, no newspaper article captured what had changed. But every leaf, every footprint in the soil, every quiet nod from a stranger who stayed just a little longer was proof that it had. Carolyn, who hadn't said much since the fire began showing up again, usually with a basket of eggs or a quip about the weeds. One morning, as Sarah handed her a bundle of herbs, Carolyn looked out across the rows and said, not unkindly, "You know, this isn't exactly what folks pictured when you said you were going to keep the land." Sarah grinned. "It's not what I pictured either." Carolyn looked back at her eyes softening. "But it works." And it did. Not just as a garden, but as something deeper. A place where pain wasn't asked to prove itself, where stories could exist without needing to be told, and where goodness was measured not in words, but in return visits and gentle hands. Years later, long after Liam had grown taller than Sarah, and long after the painted sign had to be redone from sun and time, the garden remained. People still came. Some old, some new, some with limp steps, some in quiet pairs, some with burdens only their silence explained. But they came, because somewhere along the way, a woman in the rain had made a choice not to look away. And that choice lit a fire that hadn't gone out. Sarah never called herself anything, not a hero, not a leader. She just kept showing up, putting seeds in soil even when storms were forecasted, offering a seat even when her knees ached, smiling even when her heart was heavy. One day, a little girl pressed a dandelion into her palm and said, "My grandpa said you make people feel real again." Sarah looked down at the yellow fluff, then up at the child, and answered, "Sometimes all it takes is to be seen." And the garden, alive and quiet and stubborn as ever, kept growing. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for staying with us until the very end of this story. It means more than you know. If this story touched you even in the smallest way, if it reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, of how one small choice can light a path for someone else, then we hope you'll carry that warmth with you wherever you are in the world. We'd love to know, where are you watching from, and how did this story make you feel? Your support helps keep stories like these alive, stories of true love, of acts of kindness, of quiet strength, of a simple woman who chose to see someone others overlooked. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more heartwarming stories, sleep stories, amazing stories, or grateful stories that bring hope and meaning, please give it a like, subscribe to our channel, and join us again next time. Until then, stay kind, stay human, and thank you for being part of this journey.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.